Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Rolling blackouts are set to ease in the coming days. That's according to Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan. He says the country's electricity supply will continue to improve over the medium term as new investments boost generation. Since last week, though, homes and businesses have been without electricity for more than 4 hours at a stretch. It's in fact 10 hours in every 24 hours with stage 5 and 6. Let's get more reaction now to this from energy analyst Mohammed Madhi, who joins us now virtually. Mr. Madhi, thank you very much and welcome to eNCA. Firstly, we saw that interview on Bloomberg with the Minister, Pravin Gordhan, saying a lot of things about, what he thinks will happen with Eskom and what he thinks should happen. He says that we must still, we must accept that we're going to have load shedding for a while. We know that. I think South Africans have become accustomed to the fact that those announcements will come. But what do you make of the fact that he says that the Eskom leadership has done the best it can?
Look, I think, it's a qualitative statement. It's not a quantitative statement. So it's very difficult to assess on what basis he's saying that. I personally don't think they've done the best they can. Some of them have. Some of the actions they've taken have been pretty good, but it's mostly been delayed. And also on the ground, if you speak to people in the industry and if you speak to people who are trying to connect projects to the Eskom grid, we see that Eskom is still delaying those projects, still dragging its feet, still not being completely transparent with IPPs and other private players in terms of its processes, in terms of connecting these projects up quickly enough. So from that perspective, I don't think the Eskom management has done everything it could have done.
And I mean, in this interview, the minister basically admitting that South Africa was supposed to have already built more power stations, etc., to increase capacity. And I think he says 2 decades ago or 20 years ago, we've become so used to government being very good at diagnosing issues. But when it comes to acting out what they say they already knew, for instance, 20 years ago, it's a whole different story.
Well, I was involved since way before then at Eskom and throughout after in the industry. There have been many instances where government has had good intentions. I mean, the regional electricity distributors is one example. That was supposed to kick off in the mid-90s, and we're now in 2022 and it still hasn't happened. Similarly, with these power stations, you'll recall even the nuclear program was supposed to have begun in late 2009, 2010. Of course, it did not for a variety of reasons. So, we've always had the problem, unfortunately, in the Department of Energy, in its various guises in South Africa, that we've never had the most optimum decision-making. We also have the split between the Department of Public Enterprises and the Department of Energy, overseeing various state-owned enterprises. That does not lead to the most efficient decision-making. And then I also have to add, and agree with former President Atlanti, that we need experts. We need experts to run these organizations. These are critical functions, not only for those organizations, but for the country. So when the minister says, there's load shedding is likely to ease, I'd like to understand on what basis he says so, because we don't know. The very nature of unplanned outages is that you don't know when the next one is going to hit. There's some things you do know and some things you don't know. And it's impossible for anyone at this point in time to say definitively that load shedding is going to ease or is not going to ease. The fact is we have very old power plants, and even your former, the former person that you interviewed just prior to me, making the point about coal-fired power plants. The fact is that most of our power plants are very old, and they will continue breaking down. And in fact, the rate of breakdown will continue. So we should not think we have 20,000 megawatts additional available if these things are maintained properly. The fact is that they are coming to the end of their design life, and we have to find replacements, and renewables are certainly the way to go.
The minister is also quoted as saying that South Africa will have load shedding for a while, but not at the magnitude that we're experiencing it right now. But we all know that, all we've seen is Eskom and its problems becoming worse. we have, for instance, for the first time ever, had to experience stage 5 load shedding for such a long period of time. They were supposed to end it yesterday, and they've extended by 2 more days, etc. So, is it, he says that, we're not going to experience it the way that we've been experiencing it now. Is that a fair assumption from the minister? I mean, I don't know what he is getting, the information that he's getting from the Eskom executives, maybe when they report back to him and the board and so forth. That's not what we're seeing. It started from generating units tripping, and now it's boilers that are leaking.
Sure. So this is exactly just to reiterate the point. These power plants are becoming worse in terms of performance and are degrading primarily because of age and then various other operational factors and in some cases corruption, etc. So for the minister to make a statement like that is not really factual. It's not accurate. I think I would like it if the minister made that an election promise and then be held accountable for that statement, because certainly, in any expert will tell you that statement cannot be borne out by the technical facts.
And I mean, lastly, I don't know what you think in terms of the fact that Eskom said yesterday, Mr. Madhi, that by tomorrow they would review. But then they say at the end of that statement or that, announcement on Twitter that they'll let us know what's going to happen next week. I mean, if you say that you were involved at Eskom and we all know and can see that things are getting worse, could this be our lives in December in South Africa? Should we start preparing ourselves for a Christmas, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day of load shedding, 10 hours a day of load shedding?
I think it's difficult to, of course, put a number to how much load shedding we'll have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fairly safe to say that we will have a fair amount of load shedding, especially if we have a hot summer. We can expect more load shedding. It's also a time when traditionally a lot of South Africa is going away on leave, so we can expect, that to impact some of the power stations. I would assume that Eskom takes action to prevent that sort of thing. But it's a reasonable assumption to make that one should be prepared for a lot of load shedding going forward, and importantly for businesses to be very prepared for load shedding going forward.
That's quite that's a sad answer to hear, especially when you hear it from somebody else. But we do have to admit that to ourselves, Mr. Madhi, especially looking at the fact that, for instance, Eskom has already gone above its budget when it comes to how much diesel they buy. And right now, they need, I think, millions to get more diesel to get this running, and money that we don't have at the moment. Could this be the reason why we're seeing, more days of load shedding and days being extended so many times?
It's certainly one of the factors that contributes to that. We also shouldn't forget that as, Eskom uses a lot of diesel, it has a wider impact in the economy as diesel prices affected, diesel shortages become more prevalent, etc. But the underlying factors behind load shedding are deep. They're not easy to solve, to resolve, and they need very urgent addressing. I think you'll recall that it was on this very station that I was amongst the first to ask for a national state of emergency for the energy industry, not in a state of emergency generally, but for the energy industry. We still haven't had serious action on that. And, these are the kinds of questions that need a multiple set of players to come to the party to resolve. And we're not seeing any of that action happening in the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madhi, for speaking to us. I think a lot of South Africans are starting to become more and more despondent. And what's happened now is that we're so sensitized and ready to get load shed that, we celebrate when we're put on stage 2 load shedding. And actually, we should not be accepting load shedding at all. That was Energy Analyst Mohammed Madhi speaking to us there via Zoom. Now,